Hello, my name is Andrei. I'm here with Alain Cardon. Happy to have you here. Thank you for coming. Alain Cardon is a master coach in ICF, International Coach Federation. So my first question to you is on team coaching. Team coaching meaning two perspectives. One is there any difference between team coaching and individual coaching? And the second perspective would be, we have team coaching, we have team buildings, we have team gatherings, all sorts of motivational approaches.
Okay.
Which is the real difference?
I'll start with the second one because it's interesting to have the context first, and
Great.
then we can move to the other one.
Mm-hmm.
In Europe and France in particular, and in general maybe, there's a lot of different approaches to working with teams. One is, in France we call it team cohesiveness, cohésion d'équipe.
Yeah.
And it's a particular type of approach. And then the same people a little while later thought it was more interesting, it was more a marketing type of approach to talk about team building.
Mm-hmm.
And then when coaching came about, well, everybody the same started saying they were doing team coaching. And very often it's almost as if the three are more or less the same as working with teams. Now, I think it's totally different approaches.
Yeah.
Team cohesiveness rests on an interesting frame of reference. Basically, the idea is to say that if you want a team to get better results, the first thing you have to do is make sure that the relationships in the team are good.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll work on the relationships between people. And as a consequence, once the relationships are good, you will get better results. Now, the reality of this approach is most of the time there is no measure of the results after a while. That if there's issues, relational issues in the team, you work on them. You may clean the slate. You may do exercises to, get to know each other better, and so on and so forth. But a few months later, you have other relational issues in the team. So you need to do it again and again and again. And a lot of very relational teams actually keep feeding the system by having relational issues and more relational issues. And it's a way of postponing ever working on getting better results. So if you say, well, how about getting higher results, better results in the system, measurable results in quality or finance or whatever, and the team members will say, well, the problem is we have bad relationships, or we have some relational issues. So it becomes like a racket.
Yeah.
Okay? And it could go on forever. Now, this market is actually treated by people with a psychological frame of reference. It's very good for psychological-oriented consultants, or because it is in the field that they like, but it's not necessarily in the field that will make organizations become more successful. Okay? Now, after a while in France, team building became the big thing. So it was not team cohesiveness anymore. They were using the word team building. They were doing the same thing, calling it team building because that was cooler. It sounded, European or international. It was an English word. But it was basically the same thing. The people didn't understand that the whole team building frame of reference is completely different. Now, the team building context or tradition comes from Anglo-Saxon background, and basically the whole idea in those cultures is you need to have motivation. People need to be motivated, and team building has been in the Anglo-Saxon environment motivational events. So you would take people down the rapids in a raft, and they'd have a terrific experience, and they would clap each other, and there'd be this big team, sort of like bodybuilding. In other words, you pump up the motivation, and when they come back, they'll talk about it for a while. this guy, I don't know, jumped off and grabbed the trapeze or missed it. But it doesn't matter, good for trying, and the whole team will applaud, and people will feel good, and then they come back, and they've been pumped up with this terrific experience. Now, the same thing will happen, actually. You have not changed anything in their work environment, in the decision-making process, in anything. They may work a little better together because of this shared experience, but they're not focused on getting better results. They're focused on doing it with motivation and so on and so on. And gradually, if nothing changes, well, the pump, I mean, there will be a leak in this motivational, force, and you'll have to start doing it again. Now, in the Anglo-Saxon context, yes, every team goes out once a year for their yearly team building, motivational event. And in France, it's more it's more used with sales team, we could say, and it's mostly organized by events-oriented people, and then really psychologists or coaches, because it's to get the motivation up. So it's good to have a big motivational speaker. We'll get a soccer player that was a champion that would go up there and do the motivational thing. So that's a completely different tradition. Now, to come to team coaching, what is team coaching? And actually, the frame of reference here is the opposite of the team cohesiveness approach. In other words, the foundation is to say, if you work on a team's interfaces, operational interfaces, focused on achieving better results, you will develop better relationships. The best way to develop better relationships is have people get better results first.
So it's reversed.
It's reversed.
Yeah.
So if you take, for instance, a basketball team, if I was a coach, I would get all the players on the court and I would teach them to pass the ball in half a second. You get the ball, you pass it, you get the ball, you pass it, you pass it, you pass it, you pass it. I would have them train on doing this for hours and days and months. Just pass the ball in less than half a second, or else you're off the tee. You're on the bench. Okay. As a result, when they will be in a future game, they will have a capacity for shifting the resources and working together because they will have excellent interface. They will probably score higher. And they will probably develop more respect with each other, more pride because they're winners. Yeah. And they will have better relationships. Relationships are the consequence of higher pride, higher results, more respect, and more interfacing between the people. So if I was really interested to get better relationships in a team, I would have them first working on getting better results. Really high Olympic level results. Okay? And this is actually confirmed. If you have a winning soccer team internationally, you never have bad relationships. The day they become losers, you will have the jealousies come up, the newspaper will be full of the bad relationships and what happened between whom and who insulted whom and so on. Poor relationships are actually what happens in losing the teams. It's a loser strategy. And they use the poor relationships to explain why they don't get results.
It's an excuse.
It's an excuse. It's a way of not focusing on getting better results together. So team coaching is actually a totally different approach that is not psychological. It's much more operational. It's much more focused on setting goals of higher results and then working and working and working and working until we get it. And by doing this, the relationships in the team will improve dramatically. Yeah?
Good relationships are a consequence of winning teams.
Yes, yes. Thank you.
Thank you.